He's got a disclaimer up for this to come live. Ready now. Ready to go.
Welcome to this inaugural meeting of the Wingecarribee Independent and Advisory Planning Assessment Panel on the 7th of April 2021. I declare the meeting open. My name is Julie Walsh and I'm the chair of today's panel. If I could firstly ask everyone to please turn their mobile phones off. I'll shortly introduce the other panel members, but firstly I have a few matters to run through. Acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledges the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call the Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council website and recorded. There are no apologies. Declarations of interest. There are no declarations of interest apart from expert member Larissa Ozog and Carl Peterson. Larissa Ozog has a declaration in respect of items 5.1 and 6.2. Larissa has declared a less than significant non-pecuniary interest in those items, as she's an expert member of the Wollongong Local Planning Panel, as is the applicant's consultant town planner Scott Lee. She has never worked in a professional capacity with Mr. Lee, nor has she ever had a personal relationship with him. In those circumstances, I have determined that she may participate in the determination and voting of those items. Carl Peterson has declared a non-significant non-pecuniary interest in items 5.1 and 6.2 because he lives in the same street as Scott Lee. He has no professional or personal relationship with Mr. Lee, and in those circumstances I've determined that he may participate in the determination and voting of those items. I just wanted to run through the procedure for this meeting. The Council website contains a copy of the operational guidelines for the panel meetings, but I'll summarise the most important points. All panel members have read the business paper and in respect of each matter carried out a site inspection and received a briefing from the Council officers. The panel has a determinative role in respect of development applications and an advisory role in respect of planning proposals on the agenda today. We'll deal with the items in the order in which they appear on the agenda. We'll hear from registered speakers, members of the public first and applicant/proponent second. The panel members may have questions of speakers and I may seek a response to any issue raised from the relevant council officer. Generally, presentations for this panel will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, but given that today we only have a few speakers, I'm going to extend that to 5 minutes per speaker today. And if a person is speaking and they're still mid-sentence, I have discretion to let them finish. Once you finish speaking, as I said, there may be questions. Where there are a number of speakers on the one item, it's not necessary for them to repeat what another has said regarding a particular issue. It's sufficient if they state that they support the previous speaker on that issue, if that's the case. Once a speaker has spoken, and this is really important, they will not be permitted to speak again unless it is in response to a question by the chair or other panel member. When we've heard from all speakers on all items, we'll move into closed session to deliberate and we'll return to the public meeting and live stream to announce our decisions. And the minutes of the meeting will be placed on the council website within 2 business days. I'd now like to introduce the panel members. The panel today comprises of 3 independent experts, including myself, and 1 community member. I'm a solicitor with over 35 years' experience in local government planning and environmental law. I'm currently chair or alternative chair of 3 local planning panels in the Sydney metropolitan area, having held those positions for the last 3 years. I'll ask the other members to introduce themselves, starting with Heather Wharton, who's sitting on my right.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a town planner. I've had over 30 years' experience. I work for myself as a planning consultant, mainly in local government and state government, and I'm an expert member of 2 local planning panels. I'm a community member of a planning panel in Sydney, and I'm also a state member of the Sydney South Regional Planning Panel. And thanks for having me come on here today.
So Larissa Ozog, who's sitting next to Heather.
Good afternoon, I'm Larissa Ozog. I'm an expert town planner, consultant. I've got over 20 years experience, mainly in local government, working in Randwick, Waverley councils, and also in the Department of Planning, where I currently have a contract role there, as well as Georges River Council, dealing with major projects. I sit on the Wollongong Local Planning Panel, Cumberland Local Planning Panel, and I'm a former planning panel member of Sutherland Council. So my background's predominantly statutory DA assessment planning, and that's my background.
And Carl Peterson, who's sitting to my left.
Good afternoon, Carl Peterson. I'm the community representative on this panel. I'm qualified as a civil engineer and had over 40 years experience in major projects with Public Works Department, Sydney Catchment Authority, Water New South Wales, and also with regional local government in the Midwestern Regional Council. I'm a member of the Southern Regional Planning Panel, community representative, and also councillors, previously Council's Floodplain Risk Management Committee and Tidy Up Committee.
Thank you. So if we will start with item number 5.1, Development Application 21/0257, a two-lot subdivision for Part Lot 313, BP 1245164, 27 Kimberley Drive, Barrel. I have two registered speakers for that matter. Mr. Peter Rowe is addressing the panel against the development, and Mr. Scott Lee will address the panel for development. So if Mr. Peter Rowe could come forward. So that's, you've got his details. Thank you. So you can have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is no mere subdivision application that can be considered alone without a site inspection of all of Milton Park and not parts, and a detailed review of its development, including original approvals, easements and plans. We are frustrated that our long-standing and valid objections continue to be ignored by Council. The application and Council's report are seriously deficient, misleading and contain errors and provide no reasonable justification for its approval in accordance with the DCP. You should have received further submissions on the deficiency of the report. This application is only about a developer further subdividing and fragmenting land at Milton Park. Otherwise, I claim that the subdivision represents a more logical and relevant boundary for ongoing management for the remaining land without cogently and explaining why or giving any reasons. Why else is it proposed that Lot 1 be the minimum 40 hectares? Does Lot 1 include the demonstration house for Village 2, which was one of 24 villas approved for Village 2? Ignore the already defined area for Village 2. Include in the subdivision a portion of developed land owned by local properties from another lot, and the subdivision not being consistent with the original approvals. Why not prepare a strata subdivision for Village 2 at the appropriate time and after the determination of Titulo's current application to increase the number of villas for Village 2, which is not referred to in the report? The report does not adequately address the heritage impacts and in particular its fragmentation, and dismisses, because of the existing fragmentation of Milton Park, its consequential further fragmentation, without discussing that this is caused by council officers' previous approval of subdivisions by Titulo and the subsequent sale or transfer of major portions of Milton Park, including the hotel. It does not consider the future sale of Village 2, Lot 1, and the recent listing for sale of the remaining land owned by Douglas Properties, nor address whether or not Village 2 is to have its own further strata subdivision, and if so, what is its impact? The report does not explain why the boundary for Village 2 will now be clear and readily managed, and surrounding lands will not be impacted, and ignores the original plans and approvals currently in place that address this. The flawed and criticised 2011 approval for Village 2 is not an answer. In addition to its other errors and omissions, the report's deficiencies include incorrect statements that the subdivision is consistent with the location of the approved Village 2 and provides lands for Village 2 in the same way as Village 1, and dismisses objections because of the deeply flawed 2011 approval, which has been criticised, particularly on heritage grounds, by councillors who have said approval should not have been given. And then the report fails to address that the area originally approved for Village 2 is 4.709 hectares, where the proposed lot encompasses 13.47 hectares. The proposed area for Village 2 has a disproportionate amount of open space compared to Village 1, that 6 villas from the 2011 approval for Village 2 are on land that was never intended to be used for development and cannot be used for their approved residential use. Yet the area of land for the proposed buildings for Village 2 greatly exceeds the area of land that's set aside for the original approved Village 2 villas and its open space, and contains buildings and land that were never intended to be part of Village 2. Further deficiencies include a continuing failure by Council to properly consider the approved master plan for the development of Melbourne Park and its associated recreational easements and plans, together with other evidence which show clearly and unambiguously the original developer's intent, as well as the original developer constructed Village 1 and commenced Village 2, each in accordance with the master plan. These failures include repeatedly ignoring objections by Philip Cox. Does not refer to the application to increase the number of villas for Village 2 is currently being considered by Council. The rejection of Tugillo's previous 2 applications to increase the number of villas for Village 2. Any heritage reports received, or that without approval extensive groundworks have been completed for these additional villas, together with other unauthorised works. While under the original approval, Village 2 could not be seen from Village 1, Council repeats Tugillo's statement to this effect when it has been pointed out to Council that it can now be seen. The report does not properly address the adverse heritage effects or problems with services and roads arising from the subdivision, and repeats claims in respect of roadworks by Tugillo, which have shown to be incorrect, or mention that Tugillo sealed a section of road when Council told it not to. It incorrectly describes the owner and incorrectly says that the current uses of certain buildings is as envisaged by the master plan, when they are not, and misdescribes buildings. This application is only about one thing: the sale and further fragmentation of Melbourne Park and destruction of its heritage values. As there are no cogent and compelling arguments in favour of the application, and as can be seen from my incomplete examples, Council's report is seriously deficient, cannot be relied upon. The application has to be refused. Please do not compound Council's past mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just wait there, I'll see if anyone has any questions.
Can I just ask Mr. Rowe where you live, or what's your interest in the
my wife owns Villa 20 in Village 1, Melbourne Park.
Right. So one of the existing developments?
One of the existing developments.
Thank you.
And
No.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
So the next speaker is sorry, just a quick. I should ask: are there any other people who lodged written objections who didn't register to speak in time who wished to speak? Only people who lodged written objections. Okay, thank you. In those circumstances, I'll hear from Scott Lee. Hello. So you're the planning. You're the planning consultant.
That's right.
And I'd be particularly interested if you have any comments on what was just said.
I have some comments.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, panel. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Scott Lee. I'm the planning consultant who's been providing services to the applicant on a continuous basis for many years. I'm therefore familiar with the applicant's current Milton Park development, including this development application, having prepared a statement of environmental effects. I was also involved in dealing with the applicant's several developments at Milton Park during my time as Director of Environmental Planning here at Inchicarry Shire Council during the period of 2005 to 2012. I've read the Council's Officer's report and I'm pleased to commend it to you. It properly addresses all of the relevant and important planning considerations. It also deals with all of the issues raised by Milton Park objectors and does so in a respectful manner. I should mention that to the best of my knowledge, over the last decade that I've been consulting with the applicant in relation to Milton Park, no objections have ever been received from property owners external to Milton Park. I've listened carefully to the previous speaker and in my opinion the issues raised are without substance, largely because they have no material relationship to the application that you are considering. This is clear from a reading of Council's report. The application involves a totally compliant two-lot subdivision. Panel members would be aware from the Officer's report the development of proposed Lot 1 is a single dwelling house which was constructed in 2004 and will sit upon a compliant 40 hectare parcel. Proposed Lot 2 is specifically designed to accommodate the approved Milton Park strata title to a tourist development which is currently well underway. All civil works, roads, retaining walls and services having all been substantially completed. I think you said earlier that you had the opportunity for a site visit, so you would have seen that work. This approval, as explained in the Officer's report, originally dates back to 1984. The objectors claim that the subdivision application and the applicant's current modification to the Milton Park strata title tourist development are interdependent. It's not the case. And I'm certain of that, as I also prepared the requisite statement of support for the applicant that was lodged with that section 4.55 application. I'm assured that that application requires no adjustment whatsoever to be made to the boundaries of proposed Lot 2, which is the subject of this application. The panel may not be familiar with that 4.55 application. However, the objectors or the question about perhaps the two applications being brought together for consideration at the same time is clearly unnecessary. Hence the report from Council Officers in front of you. If the two applications should reasonably have been dealt with as one, then the Council would have reported it that way. They are completely independent and not in conflict. As I've stated, I'm totally familiar with the application and believe it to be totally compliant. Proposed Lot 1 is, as I've said, 40 hectare compliant hectare parcel. Proposed Lot 2 will allow the registration of a new parcel, boundaries of which are consistent with those already approved by the original Milton Park consent as modified by LUA 110869, which is the 4.5, which is now subject to a modification. The development is under construction. Its extent can be seen on the ground. This is precisely the type of outcome that clause 4.2D of the Inchicarry LNP was designed to allow. And this is the conclusion reached by Council's assessment report. Put simply, there exists no basis in my mind, either legally or on merit, in which Council should reject the application. Thank you in anticipation of your concurrence and hopefully approval. I'm pleased to answer any particular questions you might have in relation to the DA. And if any of that extends to comments or questions in relation to the broader development, I'm happy to try and answer those as well.
Thank you. So I'll just go first. So the my understanding is clause 4.6 of the Inchicarry LEP would not be available to be utilised here if necessary because one of the lots is less than 90% of the minimum lot size.
That would be correct, but we don't believe it's necessary.
Yes, no, I understand that there is no clause 4.6. So the only power we have to approve the application is clause 4.2D. So do you have a copy of...
I don't have anything.
Oh, okay, so I'll just read. So clause 4.2D4 says development consent must not be granted for the subdivision of land to which this clause applies unless the consent authority is satisfied that, and there are three cumulative requirements. And the second one I want to ask you about is the subdivision is necessary for the ongoing operation of the permissible use. And so I have two questions. What do you say is the permissible use referred to in that clause? And secondly, why do you say this subdivision is necessary for the, as opposed to desirable or?
Yeah, permissible use is the, relates back to the original approval granted in 1985, which was for a range of tourist-related development, but also including 44 strata title villages, 20 of which were constructed in Village 1, and 24 had remained. So the approved use is the 44 strata title villages, or part thereof, that are now under construction. So there's an approval for that. That's never been in question. All the other elements of the original approval have been put in place and constructed, and this is the final piece of the puzzle, if you like. So there is an approval in place. The necessity, it's often called the village, you know, or the Milton Park village. What's necessary is to create a parcel of land for that village. Then on top of that would be a strata title scheme for the ongoing management of those villas, in accordance with the original approval that was granted for 44 strata title villa units. So that's how we, I suppose, reconcile those provisions in the LEP. The original approval and the necessity for ongoing management of the parcel.
If the subdivision was not approved, is there any reason why those other villas couldn't be built in strata title? It would just mean that you'd have a larger area of common property.
That's probably correct from a legal point of view.
And my second question is, C says, so this is 4.2D 4C, the subdivision, we have to be satisfied the subdivision is appropriate having regard to the natural and physical constraints affecting the land. Mm-hmm. So you've got this wastewater treatment facility at the moment that's servicing the two lots proposed to be subdivided, and if this subdivision goes ahead, then that infrastructure will be on the single dwelling house lot, but will be servicing the villas as well. Do you think, and it's proposed there be some easements, do you think that's actually appropriate?
Well, the treatment plant's been there for some time, servicing the development and has the capacity to do so. I'm not too sure that it's inappropriate or not a situation that can't be properly managed. It wouldn't be the first time that infrastructure is associated with one piece of land is on another and is dealt with by easements. I'm not too sure there's any.
So it's just, I haven't come across that before.
I suppose it's part of.
I mean, I've seen pipes, I've seen drainage pipes, sewage, but I just haven't seen something like this, which is an above ground piece of infrastructure that's servicing a number of.
There's a number of unusual circumstances here, and then partly because of the original approval we're dealing with dates back to 1984. But from our point of view, the infrastructure is in place, is appropriate, can be legally accessed and maintained, and all of those things. We didn't ever feel that there was a necessity for it to be on the same allotment. It's not on the same allotment as Village 1 that it services now, so I don't think that it's unusual in that respect.
Are you aware of any issues with the fact that it's on this lot servicing another lot?
Not that I'm aware of. There's never been any problem with that, or problem with accessing it, or problem with maintenance of it. It's never had any orders issued against it for not performing its function. So I'm not aware that that's a problem at all.
Okay, they were my questions. Did you have any questions, Heather?
Sure, I just want to clarify the existing subdivision pattern. So, I don't know if you can see this, but at the moment, the blue outline is the site, is that correct? Is that like the whole, what's known as the Milton Park site?
That's correct, yes.
So how many lots are there existing exactly?
There's the lot we wish to subdivide.
So that's this one
up, yes,
here?
the northern part, and then
That's
there's
right.
the other lot around the Milton Park itself.
Yep.
I believe there is, the Village 1 sits on its own strata plan.
Right,
So
so,
you've got your pen on that now.
right, so there's actually, so at the moment there's two lots. There's the lot, is that right? The lot that has Milton Park.
There's two or three. Existing, three. There is three existing.
There's three. Right, so the villas that are already constructed and been there for some time.
Yes, yeah, they were built very shortly after the original.
This may assist to show the existing lands, the proposed lot 2 and lot 1, or the existing.
Sorry, I'm not
No,
going to
that's
take
okay,
any
I
of
just,
this.
I've got my information here. So this was, so just.
So
let
lot
me
one, the
get
village
the
one
history.
sits on it as a strata plan. It was
Right.
constructed shortly
Yeah.
after the original approval.
Yep, and it may be on a separate lot as well, to the Milton Park.
To the Milton Park.
Right, and
And
then,
then there's the other lot that we're now talking
right,
about.
and those villas were constructed under the same 1984 consent.
The village one, or the
Sorry,
one, yes.
Village 1 was under the
Yes,
1984
everything's
consent,
under the consent.
and Village, you're saying Village 2.
It's the continuation of
Of
the
a-
original approval.
Right, and there was mentioned by the objector about a 2011 consent.
That's the, what's referred to as LUA 11/0869, which was granted by council in 2011. That was a modification to the original consent. And it was in relation to the style and the placement of Village 2 dwellings. The currently before council, but not before the panel this afternoon, is a modification to that. And the previous speaker had mentioned a couple of times, I think, about increasing the numbers of dwellings. It's not an increase in the number of dwellings, it's a reorganisation and modification within that area of the approved number of dwellings.
Right.
So there's no consideration of any increase in what has already been approved. It's trying to arrange them in the most appropriate fashion in that general location that you would have sought this afternoon.
And that consent had commenced, because we can see that,
That
well,
can-
this
yes.
area at least, there's like.
That's
different
correct.
plots.
The construction certificate was issued under
Right.
that approval, and the works are on the ground. You can see them.
And then this is intended to be strata subdivided if the approval is granted to your modification.
That's correct, in accordance with the original approval, which was for 44 strata title villa units.
Right.
And so yes, the end result is to build them and to eventually strata title them,
Mhm.
so they can be managed in that way.
Right.
But to create a lot of land around them for that purpose.
Yeah. And the use for these villas over here, under the 1984 consent, what was the approved use for the villas?
They were the first 20 of the approved 44.
Yeah, and the actual use that was approved though? Is
That's
that like
right, villas.
residential, tourist, what's the
Both.
approval for? Either use, and the same thing.
And they are
goes
used, as far as I'm aware, they've always been used in that manner, some as residences on a more permanent basis, and some as more tourist accommodation or short-term.
And the same thing applies for the other 20, they're
They're
subject
not
to this
built
site,
yet, but that is possible as well.
but that's the approved use at the moment.
The approved use is, yes,
Okay,
44
for
strata title,
residential.
but under that broad heading of the tourist accommodation and
Okay.
tourist
And
development.
just one other thing I wanted to check was I understand there's the state heritage listing, which
Yes.
we've been given a copy of the extent of that. And then there's the local LEP listing, which covers a much bigger area.
That's, you find that all the time.
So I was just wondering, and my understanding from the council report and speaking to the council officers is that part of, definitely part of the state listing, the outbuilding, the Arts and Crafts Centre, I don't know, is part of this development?
That's right. It's part of,
Part of the
the
lot.
village, which, that second set of villas.
Right. And that's within the curtilage of the Milton Park State Heritage listing,
That's what you're showing me
Yeah,
now, yes.
And then the actual council heritage listing is much larger.
It's based on what DP,
Yeah.
so it's less precise.
Right, because there doesn't seem to have been a heritage impact statement lodged to address clause 510, or what was the thinking about addressing
For this
council heritage?
application.
For this application, yeah.
Oh, the thinking on that was that we were simply trying to create a management tool, if you like, for something that had already been approved and been assessed previously. There was no change in the physical location or the physical character or scale of anything we were doing. So our view was that there wouldn't be any impact upon the heritage. Those issues had previously been considered.
Right. Okay. Did you have any questions?
Just one question following on, Julie, about the wastewater treatment system. And I see the reference in the draft conditions referring to that Section 88B instruments and so on, which may burden lot to. Just on the basis of the existing effluent application area, do you have a feel for if we're going to have to increase that significantly in order to cater for this new, or
Not for these.
okay. Right, so the existing effluent management area should be adequate in terms of what's been defined.
For what's already what has been approved.
So
This application will not change that or the demand upon that.
So that'll be assessed prior to the issue of the subdivision certificate anyway.
Will have to be, yes.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions. So Mr. Jauncey, Ross Jauncey,
Yep.
did you want to comment on anything that had been said in regard to the presentations or questions?
Probably just on the point of the effluent treatment plant. That was originally designed to cater for the 44 villas. So it didn't need an upgrade at all when the 2011 approval was given. There was a minor condition from memory from Water New South Wales to increase the pump size. And that was the only increase on it, but nothing on the effluent treatment area.
All right, so the approximate area that's been allocated to it
Was originally designed to cater for the 44
So is it how many hectares, or was it a huge part, significant part of the adjacent lot? Or?
No, it's on that what will be the 40 hectare lot.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is 5.2, modification to development application 18/074405, proposed alterations and additions to the Wingecarribee Shire Council Administration Building at 68 Elizabeth Street, Moss Vale. There are no registered speakers for this matter, so we will determine that in closed session at the end of all presentations and come back to announce our decision with all the others when that's been done. The next item is 6.1, planning proposal to rezone land at Welby Garden Centre. Again, there are no registered speakers, so the position with that is the same as the last one. We will come back and announce our decision in relation to that with all decisions. The next item is 6.2, planning proposal to rezone and reduce the minimum lot size for land at Alpine. Mr. Scott Lee is addressing the panel. Would you like to come forward? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so you did hear me say that we've been to inspect all of the sites on the list, so we have been to the site and we've read the...
Thank you again, panel.
Yeah.
Again, I've got some pretty prepared notes helping along the way. On this matter, I'm speaking on behalf of the two landowners whose properties are the subject of the planning proposal. Just mentioned that you have been to this site, which is great. Look, in the short time available, it may be best for me to go to the conclusions of Council's assessment report and why I believe they don't substantiate Council's rejection of the planning proposal. Firstly, it needs to be acknowledged, I believe, that not all planning proposals are strategic in nature. In the old language, we might refer to this planning proposal as spot rezoning. In my submission, spot rezoning will always have a role to play because it's true that an LEP can never be infallible and there will always be a need to make adjustments to fix anomalies or inequities that arise when broad brush whole of Shire local plans are made. In fact, the previous item on the agenda this afternoon is a spot rezoning to change the rules in recognition that those rules were not really the most appropriate for the circumstances of that site. Simply, that's also the case with this planning proposal. Now, if I go to the conclusion of the report, it states that the planning proposal has been put forward on the basis of it doing no harm rather than creating a benefit. I believe it's certainly true that the planning proposal would do no harm. No harm to the environment, no harm to any neighbours, amenity, no harm to the character of the locality in which the sites are situated, no harm to any of Council's strategic planning objectives. In fact, the report, in my view, does not substantiate any adverse impacts that were arised. This is because, one of the reasons at least, is because the planning proposal is very modest. It simply results in a total of 3 new dwellings, each capable of being accommodated on the subject land without any adverse impacts whatsoever, including no impacts on water quality within the water catchment area, which Council says in its report's a primary concern and reason to reject the planning proposal. So, no harm, I agree. What then of the flip side, creating a benefit? Firstly, environmental benefit. The conclusion of the Council's assessment report points to the current E3 zoning as being consistent with the existing friendly ecological communities on the land. Puts this forward as a reason not to rezone. Yet the planning proposal put forward suggests that this substantial area can and should be rezoned to D2 environmental conservation, ensuring its long-term protection. Wrapping up this area into a conservation zone is a very strong benefit. There's also a benefit, I believe, in equity and confidence in the planning system. What I mean is this. Strategic planning should be logical. The reasons why rules change between one property and another should be clear and convincing to all property owners. They should be equitable. Sometimes that we as professionals see things differently, but the public don't necessarily pick that up. They rely on the planning system to be equitable and clear. In this case, the subject land is exactly the same as the surrounding land. It's within a well-defined locality, yet the subject land has different planning rules to other land in that locality, is therefore denied an equitable opportunity. Supported that the planning proposal would simply lead to a development outcome that's completely consistent with the pattern of development of its neighbours. In this case, the spot rezoning, or the changing of the rules, is necessary to ensure planning consistency. It's not being put forward to move away from consistency. This planning proposal would be an equitable outcome, not one that favours one landowner over another. This would strengthen the confidence in the planning system. The Council's report states that the Council does not generally support site-specific amendments not supported by a strategic plan function. That's a reasonable position to take if the planning proposal was asking for a change in strategic direction. But it's not. The planning proposal has no particular strategic ramifications for the region, the Shire, or the water catchment. In my conclusion, my request to the panel is simply to judge the planning proposal on the basis that it in fact does no harm, and that the resultant development that could flow from the planning proposal would be completely consistent with development on adjoining lands in the locality. I also ask that the panel judge on the basis that one-off spot rezonings exist for a reason. Sometimes inequitable and illogical planning outcomes are inherited and need to be acknowledged and adjusted to maintain faith in the planning system that is responsive to the needs of all landowners. Happy to take any questions if you have.
Thank you. So do you have you've got a copy of the planning report there?
No, I don't.
So I'll just, on page, I'll just hand you my.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
On
On page 131.
131?
Yeah, there's a copy of the zoning
Yes.
plan.
Yes.
And so to the south of the site is further E3
Yes.
zone land with a 40 hectare
Yes.
minimum. And then to the north of the site is RU4 zone
RU4.
land with a 10 acre.
Correct. Which is.
So if this land was rezoned and had a 10 hectare minimum lot size, why wouldn't the people to the south be able to argue that they should have a similar rezoning based on the fact that they were in proximity to this land? Is that something we can anticipate could happen?
I'm not too sure if you can, maybe that would happen, I don't know. When I say this is a well-defined locality, you're right, you point that out on the map there, but there is a yellow line that runs in between there, and that's the railway line. It's quite a physical barrier, if you like, a differentiation between one locality and another. So the land where I'm talking about is to the north of the railway line, right? Adjacent to the old Hume Highway, bound on the west by the Hume Highway, it is a more discrete location than what you might anticipate it to be when you look at a map like this. And that's part of the proposition is that the railway line is in a different area, has a different character, if you like, and it's not if you drive along there, or if you're well, I suppose, more familiar with the location and the Shire. You travel along Old South Road towards our my client's land, and it's a different character when you get to the old Hume Highway, turn left up towards our property. It is different. It's changed. You've got the RU4 on the right. You've got our property on the left. The character is different. The pattern of development is different. The railway line is acting as a very distinct barrier or demarcation between one area and another, just as the freeway does to the west. So I'm not sure it's proper, if I can use that word, to judge it based on that map.
Right, that's the question. Thank you, Tony.
There's also in the council officer's report, it talks about the strategic aims of the regional plan and then council's housing strategy. This is on page 144. So it talks about the council's policy is that, or the regional plan talks about new development is supposed to be in accordance with the regional plan and council's housing strategy. And the council have told us that, the council officers have told us that this particular piece of land wasn't identified in the housing strategy. So did your clients make a submission on the housing strategy, or what do you say about that aspect of the development?
No, well, answer the first question, no. There's no particular submission made to the housing strategy. I mean, it wasn't identified in the housing strategy with 95% of the Shire land wasn't. I mean, the housing strategy wasn't about necessarily or focused on the environmental zones or the rural areas of the Shire so much as it was about infill development and opportunities for new greenfield subdivision areas. If the council had exhibited or requested submissions about what people thought about large lot rural residential, should we have more or less of it, or should we change rural zonings or some E3 zones back to RP, no doubt there would have been a whole bag of different submissions made. I'm not too sure that the planning proposal should be judged on the basis that a submission to the housing strategy was not made.
Oh, no, I'm not, I wasn't saying,
Okay, let me take that back.
I was just interested to see if you or your client had made a submission.
What I should have said, what I should have said was I'm not too sure that the housing strategy is particularly relevant to the consideration of this matter. And I'll just reiterate again that this isn't a huge, in our view, a strategic decision as such. The planning proposal isn't being put forward on the basis of some higher level strategic aim or implications that flow from that. It's as I said, I mean, it's a situation where the land, we believe, has some latent potential that is exactly the same as land all around it, and you can achieve a minor outcome, a positive outcome for a landowner, without undermining any of the council's strategic objectives and without causing any adverse environmental impact. We looked at it and thought that there's a little bit of an anomaly here in how things have panned out over the years. Call it a spot rezoning, which is the old, like I say, the old terminology. That's not a bad thing. It's just the way it needs to be sometimes, and that's how we put it forward. There is no harm, and that's a good term in there. We have put it forward on the basis that there is no harm to council, to anyone else for that matter.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify one other aspect of the proposal? So on the drawing that you have on page 132, so it shows the potential lot boundaries should the planning proposal go ahead of so there's three lots on the left-hand side portion, if I want, or the western portion, and then it just shows the lots. But the other lot is just remains as one lot.
No, I think that's not quite right, is it? If you look at that diagram, I think you can see lot 4.
Yeah.
And then in the northeastern corner, you can see that there's a a larger building, a set of buildings up there.
Sure.
That's the
Yeah.
existing house.
Yes,
Then to the west of that, there's a little orange square.
okay,
That's adding the case where a suitable dwelling location could be for on lot 4 as a second dwelling location. Within that lot 4, it's possible to create a couple of larger smaller lots. Both would be well in excess of the 10 hectares. But, sorry, there's a line missing on that plan. It should have just given an indication of how you might be able to subdivide that. The dwelling location is that orange dot, and that's what's been assessed as from a bushfire and from disposal.
so potentially how many lots would there be, how many lots?
Two. Yes, so the existing house,
Yeah,
in terms of dwellings. So two lots, 2 dwellings there.
Right.
The existing one, roughly that orange square is a suitable location. And then on the other property, you've got what we've shown there.
and the curvature of the new lot that contains the orange along, that would have to be, those would take 10 hectares.
A minimum 10, yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And it would include the vegetated land.
Well, it could. Yes, it could include, but it's going to need to. The owner of that land has already made some inquiries around conservation agreements and what have you. It's a high quality area of renewable bushland. It straddles the boundary, as you can see. The proposition we put forward would be that a rezoning or a plan proposal would change that zone to an E2 conservation zone, which we think is an appropriate outcome, and also sends a very strong message about what that land is about. It's conservation, and it could be part of a property, individual property.
So as it would be envisaged on the E2 land, part of it would be on lot 1, or part of it would be on lot 1,
Yes.
proposed lot 1,
Yes,
on the western portion of the site,
yes,
and then on lot 4, part of it would be on 2 lots.
correct.
Okay.
That's the possible or probable
Okay.
outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a general question. I know that when there's planning proposals and you're rezoning, often if it's an anomaly, then we're rectifying an anomaly in the zoning. But in this case, you're seeking a clear different zone as such. What's the public benefit of that? So your client will be getting a benefit, and I suppose
Yes.
any rezoning really should have some public benefit as well attached to it. So what would the community or what would the public be getting out of this? Because you're into zoning for the conservation part of the project. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that much tighter than what your E3 current zoning does to that land. You can't remove that, that's already designated as significant vegetation.
Yeah, true.
And so, yes, you're tightening it a little bit more by an E2 zoning, but you're really not allowing much to happen now under the E3 zoning. So I suppose, what's the public benefit out of this?
Well, I'm not too sure there is any particular, physical public benefit I can point to, or other than, like I said in my opening remarks, is that I think that I've been willing to address a situation that we don't believe is actually reflective of what's happening there, what's suitable. The planning process has been responsive to the needs of property owners. That's a public benefit more broadly, isn't it? That people see, well, yes, the system works. I can't point to a particular public benefit. I'm not too sure that every planning proposal, mind you, has that public benefit.
No.
How that arises. I know what you mean by when you raise it, but I'm not sure. There isn't any specific. There's nothing that I can put on the table, and I think your comment you made about the vegetation is fair and valid. I mean, it's there now. It's of high quality. Under this set of planning controls or any other, it's going to be retained as good permanent vegetation with a whole raft of other controls that are going to make sure that happens. There's no physical public benefit I can offer you or the council or anyone else arising from this, other than to say that people, the owner most certainly public benefit. There's a couple of extra opportunities for people who desire a rural residential lifestyle on a reasonably sized lot. That's about it.
Okay, thanks. Peter, do you have a question?
Just an observation, I guess, this reference to the regional plan from a planning perspective or background, the value of councils generally producing a regional plan provides certainty and to avoid the need for spot rezonings. I think
that's a general principle, that's correct.
So just looking at the content of the regional planning information it's in, this application of yours supporting views how does that address?
Well, it doesn't particularly address it. It's an example of where the broader policy direction of the statement is completely valid. But the circumstances of this individual's property or land deserves some reconsideration. And that alone isn't undermining the broader strategy. I wouldn't have thought that there would be any particular flow-on effect or undermining of the regional strategy if this was supported, because it's based on a very particular set of circumstances that we've put forward for this land. It's not as I said before, it's not being put forward as a strategic change to council's direction or their planning controls. We're not asking for a broad area of the Shire to go from 40 hectares to 10 hectares. It's very simply a set of circumstances that apply here, and we would like them to be reviewed.
But the normal process it goes through the review of the council's regional plan.
Well, I think yes, that is one way to do it, and maybe that's council has in mind for the future a review of all of its rural lands, and we know whether or not the minimum lot size is the right one, which areas have got the zoning right and which they should be reviewed. Not aware that works on the table, mind you, and I suppose we don't see any impact in making a one-off decision that is suitable to the circumstances of this land.
Okay, thank you. I might just ask Council Strategic Planner, Michael Park, did you want to respond to anything that's been said?
Look, I think, yes, but I'll be very brief. Look, the proponent's right in there will be times where spot rezonings are appropriate, and that is when there is a clear anomaly or where there is a significant public benefit. We've just adopted really contemporary land use strategies, so both the housing strategy and the local strategic planning statement, which provide a framework for land use planning in the Shire. This is one of the first proposals we've seen since the adoption of those strategies, and it's clearly not identified in those strategies and contrary to a lot of what we're trying to achieve through those strategies. And my concern is that if you start to make spot rezonings the norm, there will always be examples where development is adjoining, a site is adjoining land that's a different zone. And if that is the test to get a rezoning, then we may as well not do strategic planning because we're opening up the floodgates. From our perspective, there's no strategic merit in this proposal, and it's clearly not an anomaly, so that's a difficult word to say. It's clearly not, I'm not going to say it. We don't think there's an error in the zoning, and we don't believe there's a strategic merit in it. And on the flip side, I do see the negatives of this proposal in terms of fragmenting agricultural land, we haven't seen a subdivision plan that showed it, but fragmentation of EEC in terms of bringing what is currently in one ownership, high quality bushland, as we've just heard, and dividing that into multiple ownerships, so starting to fragment it. It is within a special catchment area of the water catchment, so it would be unsewered and starting to bring high risk land uses into an unsewered area within the special catchment areas of the drinking water catchment. So all those things are right, they are manageable from a land capability perspective if the land was already zoned or if there was strategic merit, but from our view there's absolutely no strategic merit in a proposal like this.
Thank you. All right, so the next item is 6.3, planning proposal to rezone land at 63 to 69 Kirkham Road Barrel from IN2 light industrial to B4 mixed use. I have a registered speaker, Rachel Streeter, to address the panel. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon to the panel and to council. Thanks for meeting with us this afternoon and for hearing what we have to say. I suppose you've all had the opportunity to review the documentation that we've prepared, which provides quite a comprehensive overview of what we see as the strategic and site-specific merit in this proposal involving a rezoning of the land to the B4 mixed-use zone and the introduction of height and floor space ratio standards to complement that new zoning. I guess to highlight what we see as the key strategic merit arguments for the proposal relate to the economic benefits associated with that. So whilst the land is currently zoned IN2 light industrial, it's clear that it's not currently serving that purpose based on the land uses that are established there or that have been on that site throughout its history and indeed throughout that wider Kirkham Road precinct. The proposal that we have put forward offers the opportunity to introduce a significant high density of employment generating floor space, therefore providing additional job opportunities, business investment opportunities, and wider economic growth opportunities based on the urban design scheme that we submitted with a plan proposal that would provide a 9.5% more employment generating floor space than what is currently on the site under its current zoning. And provide opportunity for 233 jobs, which represents over that 800% increase compared to the current 27 jobs that are supported on that site. And indeed, this speaks to the significant economic benefits there. We also point to the fact that whilst there is some demand for industrial growth within the Shire, we contend that that is better accommodated in the Moss Vale Enterprise Corridor, which provides a significant supply of industrial land, including, based on the economic assessment that was undertaken about 6 months ago at the time of submitting the planning proposal, included 370 hectares of vacant industrial land. And indeed, from the movement within the Kirkham Road precinct and this site, we can see that we have former users and operators relocating and are also aware of other businesses relocating to that precinct because it better accommodates their industrial functions, whilst there is opportunity for other businesses and employment users to locate within a B4 zone. In tandem with that, the site is strategically located directly adjacent to a train station, therefore providing opportunity for transit-oriented development, providing new workers and new residents, new visitors with the opportunity to use public transport and also benefit from immediate proximity to the town centre and all its services, shops, activities on the other side of that station. I know in Council's report there was a point raised regarding competition with that town centre, but I think it's important to acknowledge that we're seeking to accommodate a different type of employment use within our site that's not currently accommodated within the established town centre. We'd be looking at larger format tenancies, more flexible floor space, loading facilities, parking for workers, for visitors, providing all of those opportunities that are not currently afforded within the existing town centre, therefore catering to a different sort of operator. And in tandem with those economic benefits, the B4 rezoning would provide the opportunity for new housing to be delivered, which responds to the call for greater housing supply and greater housing diversity, particularly infill housing, medium density, smaller housing products to accommodate the emerging and growing needs within the Shire for these different sorts of housing products. And together with the employment, economic benefits, the housing and dwelling delivery, the site would offer the opportunity to provide significant public benefit through publicly accessible open space, improved access down to the riparian corridor, rehabilitation of that riparian corridor, and also the provision of up to 150 commuter car parking spaces, for which we understand is a significant need in association with the train station. And I guess looking at another point raised in Council's report regarding flood risk, we do note that no buildings would be provided within the high flood risk precinct, and we've looked at the opportunity to integrate free water within the design of development within the low and medium flood risk precincts, and hence have the environmental support to back that proposal with respect to flooding. And so given the significant economic and public benefits associated with the proposal, the strategic and site-specific merit that we've identified, we'd recommend that the panel support or provide a favourable recommendation to the planning proposal, or otherwise we have requested that the matter be deferred so that we're given greater opportunity to provide a comprehensive response to the matters raised in Council's report, should further consideration to those matters be considered necessary. And we have submitted a legal letter from a legal representative requesting that deferral.
I might just start with that question of the flooding. In the council officer's report, it says, sorry, have you finished?
Yes.
It says, this is page 275, and obviously flooding is a very difficult topic at the moment. The proposal to significantly increase the development potential of flood-prone land and to allow over 200 residential dwellings to be built on the site is contrary to the state flood-prone land policy, the Floodplain Development Manual 2005, and the relevant ministerial directions, Ministerial Direction 4.3. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, so as I said, we would not be providing any buildings that fall within the high-risk flood precinct. All of that would be open space and rehabilitated riparian corridor area in the low and medium flood precincts. We would be providing a design that responds to that flood risk to ensure that there was no unacceptable impact either on the flood characteristics of the land or the safety of future occupants.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
You mentioned just then in the actual application that the B4 zone will provide greater employment generating uses compared to the IN2 zoning.
Yeah.
What sort of uses are envisaged that will provide that in greater? What can you do in the B4 zone that you can't do in the IN2 zone?
So I guess the B4 zone provides the opportunity to see a renewal of the site. In conjunction with that, types of uses that are permitted include urban services and creative industries, things like that that are already permitted in the IN2 zone, as well as retail premises, business premises, a number of the types of uses that would complement, I guess, the urban services sort of uses.
So the retail uses and the business uses that are things that are not permissible in the IN2 are the employment generating uses. And what proportion, like when it's rezoned or it looks to be rezoned, there's nothing to say that it couldn't be wholly residential. Because residential without any commercial retail is permissible? Is that the case?
I'll go with the nodding.
So what proportion or how is it embodied in the planning proposal to ensure that the benefits that you were saying in terms of the employment generating, would be actually realised if the land was rezoned, because you would have like one shop, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of ensuring that a certain proportion of the site was provided, or a certain proportion of the floor space, get the opportunity for a split floor space ratio sort of thing, so a maximum of 1-to-1 across the site with a certain proportion allocated to.
And is that what you proposed in the planning proposal?
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
within the planning
We've
proposal
broken-
document that
we've
you've
broken
got,
it up.
it talks
Okay.
about different land uses and a sort of mix of land uses, offices and
Right,
residential.
okay, so it's not just as it said, a straight out FSR and height.
We've
No, that's the,
provided a breakdown of
Okay.
the different.
Oh, so it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And can I just ask another question about the flooding, like, assuming I'm reading it right in terms of there being the proposed maximum 15-metre height limit, and that would allow 4 stories. So that would allow 3 stories of residential and 1 story of commercial. Is that how it's being envisaged?
In our urban design report, the scheme that's envisaged includes, well, given the slope of the site, I guess it's tiered down. We're responding to the topography. Not all buildings are proposed to be 4 stories.
Right.
We're going to provide quite a sensitive response, and indeed from the street, it is essentially here as a 1 or 2 story development. In some locations, there are 2 stories of commercial or employment generating floor space, with 2 levels of residential top. In other locations, it's 1 level of
Right. And
commercial based on the slope.
the maximum height that's been sought, has that taken into account the, any raising of the buildings, required to address the flood, planning level?
Yeah, it has. It's taken into account for
Did you have a question, Ruth?
Yes, I suppose one of the questions was, or not even a question again, it might be a bit of a statement, is it seems to me that you've had some pre-lodgement advice and council kind of said that this is not out of question in the future, given that they're doing a review of their employment plans currently.
Yeah.
So it seems to me potentially that this could have legs in the future, particularly maybe the whole precinct would need to be evaluated by strategic planning to see if that whole, because I think you're again doing a bit of a spot rezoning and it's a little bit of a fragmentation, given that this IN2 zone is quite small, it's not a very big area. So, you know, it may be that you're a bit premature in what you're requesting, given that if there's some development in the enterprise corridor at Mossvale, which I understand hasn't occurred yet. Once that starts, and obviously in a few years there might be some different development occurring, this could have potential given its location, but I think it would need to be looked at more as a precinct and a broader scale rather than just this particular site that obviously has a lot of constraints as well. But it seems from the Port Council has kind of initiated, you know, a review of employment lands, and at this point in time, they're not anticipating to change this, but they could in the future. So I think that's something that you should maybe work a bit more with council to see, and it might be a bit premature, but something that could be looked at in the future.
Yeah, I guess in thinking about that, there's, I guess, the element of uncertainty in terms of waiting for government-led employment land reviews and that sort of thing. I also know councils is currently on hold, while the state government looks at employment land zoning in as well. I guess for this site specifically, we consider that on its own. It also exhibits site-specific and strategic merit, given its location in direct vicinity to the train station, given the creek corridor to the west, which provides a logical boundary there, given the fact that to the north, whilst there is some land zoned into, it's accommodating developing houses that have been there for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, just one thing, I know the comments made on the flooding issues, it is the whole site's medium flood risk, and that's based on existing data. I'm on the floodplain risk management committee, so I've got And I guess moving 200 cars at short notice, given that the flood events we have on the Longman Yilgarn Creek is very flashy, very fast, and there's not a lot of time, including the access you have there for traffic, but that's just observation from my experience living in this country. But the land use conflict, just looking at the adjoining properties there today, we've got some industrial activity occurring on either side, whether it's the Australia Post or it's the trailer manufacturing. In my experience, where you put quite different land use adjoining different types of zoning and so on, it leads to quite a bit of angst. So has there been any particular consideration given to how that would work, a residential development adjacent or within an industrial zone?
Yeah, well, we note the current interface where there are existing residential dwellings immediately adjacent or on the opposite side, to the north there of our site, which has historically been IM2 zoned, and other examples in that area where there are dwellings in immediate or very close proximity to the industrial land uses, and consider that a new development such as we would seek to provide could be built with the appropriate acoustic controls, the appropriate setbacks, landscape treatments, but particularly through construction and through design built to promote acoustic attenuation, and thinking, I guess, about the specific siting of different land uses and the car parking component to mitigate potential land use conflicts.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's one more item on the agenda, 6.4, plan proposal to undertake administrative amendments to the Introductory Open Branch Plan 2010. Under section 3.22 of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act 1979. There are no speakers for that item, so we will deal with that in closed session and come back and announce our decision. So that brings to a close this part of the public meeting. We will now, everyone will now leave us, and we will go into closed session to make our determinations, and then we'll reopen the meeting. Because it will be live streamed, you don't obviously have to wait around. I don't know if there are facilities for people to wait around, or would it be better if they left and just watched it on live stream?
Probably better on live stream,
Yes.
but you can sit outside if you wish to sit outside.
I mean, we could be an hour, so as I say, you can watch it on the tellies. Thank you very much for everyone for coming, and I'd like to thank the staff for making it all go smoothly, and my fellow panel members. Thank you very much. This part of the meeting.
You want to come this way? Please.